Some crimes are so heartbreaking or shocking, they change laws, change society, or even earn the label crime of the century. But the stories that made headlines in decades past aren't necessarily remembered today. I'm Amber Hunt, a journalist and author, and in each episode of this show, I'll examine a case that's maybe lesser known today, but was huge when it happened. This is Crimes of the Centuries. Before we begin, a heads up that this episode documents some disturbingly hateful thoughts and speech. Please take care. It's just after noon on August 25th, 1967. George Lincoln Rockwell pulls into the parking lot of the Speedy Laundromat in Arlington, Virginia. He's got a basket of dirty clothes. It's an ordinary Friday. Rockwell walks inside, greets the attendant, then stops. "Oh, I forgot something," he says. Maybe it's bleach, something mundane. Whatever the case, that throwaway sentence, "Oh, I forgot something," are his last words. He walks back to his car, a Chevrolet, starts it up, and backs out of the space. 2 shots crack through the driver's side windshield. The first tears through Rockwell's shirt, but misses his body, embedding in the seat. The second doesn't miss. It hits him square in the chest, rupturing his aorta. The car, now driverless, rolls backward and bumps another vehicle. Rockwell somehow manages to crawl across to the passenger seat. He opens the door from inside and staggers out into the parking lot. He rises to his feet, barely, and points up toward the flat roof of the laundromat where the shooter had been positioned. Then he turns, looking back across Wilson Boulevard toward the headquarters of the political party he had founded, and collapses. He dies right there in the parking lot at 12:02 p.m. The man who bled out on the asphalt of a suburban strip mall was one of the most notorious in America, and for good reason. Rockwell was the founder of the American Nazi Party, rebranded less than a year before his death as the National Socialist White People's Party, or the NSWPP. His murder shocked no one, but it still made international headlines. The funeral would become a circus that made even more. Yet today, most people have never heard his name. George Lincoln Rockwell didn't start out as America's most infamous Nazi. He was born in Bloomington, Illinois in 1918. His parents, George Lovejoy "Doc" Rockwell and Claire Shod, were both vaudeville performers. His father became a major star, headlining across the country and earning big money. By the early 1930s, Doc Rockwell was pulling in some $3,500 a week, a fortune during the Depression. His friends included Fred Allen, Groucho Marx, Jack Benny, George Burns. But his marriage was troubled. When Rockwell was 6 years old, his parents divorced. For the rest of his childhood, he split his time between his mother in Atlantic City, New Jersey, and his father in Boothbay Harbor, Maine. His father was emotionally distant. Biographers describe Doc Rockwell as an egomaniac who constantly belittled his eldest son. One relative said he couldn't recall a single instance of Doc expressing affection toward the boy, who everyone called Lincoln or Link. Rockwell attended prep school in Maine, then enrolled at Brown University to study philosophy. He dropped out and joined the Navy, where he trained as a pilot. He served in World War II, flying in both the European and Pacific theaters, and later in the Korean War in non-combat roles. He was good at it. He rose to the rank of commander over 19 years of service. After the war, he attended the Pratt Institute of Art in Brooklyn, developing drawings he would later use for Nazi propaganda. He married twice. His first wife, Judy Altman, gave him 3 daughters. That marriage ended in 1953. Later that year, he married an Icelandic woman named Thora Hallgrímsson. They spent their honeymoon in Berchtesgaden, Germany, where Hitler once owned a mountain retreat in the Bavarian Alps. It was during the 1950s, while he was still in the Navy, that Rockwell read Hitler's Mein Kampf. His politics grew increasingly radical and vocal. In 1960, the Navy discharged him 1 year short of retirement because of his extremist political views. In 1959, Rockwell founded the American Nazi Party in Arlington, Virginia. And with that, he effectively launched the neo-Nazi movement in the United States as we know it. Before Rockwell, there were scattered anti-Semites and white supremacists, sure, but Rockwell created what one scholar called an Americanized version of National Socialism. He was the first to really package it, brand it, and make it visible. This is the late journalist Charlie Clark, author of the article The Assassination of an Arlington Nazi.
So the Nazis were publicity hounds. They organized a lot of rallies. They picketed the movie Exodus. They picketed downtown a nightclub appearance by the black comedian Sammy Davis. They organized rallies at the Ellipse near the White House. It was in 1962 that the Virginia General Assembly condemned Rockwell as an enemy of the state.
And make no mistake, Rockwell's beliefs were monstrous. He called for gassing what he termed communist Jews. He wanted to forcibly deport all Black Americans to Africa. He was one of the earliest Holocaust deniers, claiming the systematic murder of 6 million Jews was a fabrication. Despite this, he drew decent audiences.
In April 1959, the police got a search warrant and they came in, they found a pistol, rifles, and about 10,000 anti-Jewish pamphlets. And 100 neighbors looked on as the Nazis marched in and out of the house doing the Sieg Heil salute. And several were charged with disorderly conduct.
Rockwell spent years touring universities across America, speaking at the University of Michigan in 1964, returning to his alma mater, Brown University, in 1966, touring Wisconsin campuses in early 1967, just months before his death. Rockwell understood that controversial campus appearances generated massive attention, provoked reactions, and spread his message far beyond the auditorium.
That's how Rockwell earned a lot of his money, with speaking fees. And in 1965, Rockwell ran for governor, and he got 6,366 votes.
By 1967, the Washington Post would call him, quote, one of the most hated men in America, end quote. Here's Rockwell in his own words.
What we are is Nazis, which means basically that we are racists. We believe in preserving a white nation, a white Christian nation, for the white Christian people who built it. I think that the Negroes did no wrong by coming here. We dragged them here, and I think we owe them something. I think we owe them a chance in their own nation in Africa. Those who wish to may remain here on reservations like the Indians were. Those who will, of their own volition, accept our help, will be aided to go over to Africa and build their own nation as our ancestors, and yours, I might say, came over here and did in America. We are not out to liquidate the Jews. We are out to liquidate communist traitors. Unfortunately, too many Jewish atheists, not religious Jews, but too many atheist Jews are mixed up in communism. The Constitution of the United States is written by the Founding Fathers, says death is the penalty for treason. I believe that.
This is from the Associated Press archives.
Mr. Rockwell, you have come before hearings and other meetings dressed in uniform. Why are you not dressed in a uniform today?
I have never come before any hearing dressed in a uniform. I use the uniform to agitate. When Martin Luther Kuhn is out in the streets agitating, why, I agitate back. And the uniform is very good for agitating. For appearing before a hearing, it's a mental battle of wits, not a battle of agitation.
By the way, he said all of that stuff while usually having a corncob pipe dangling from his mouth. It was his trademark. How he could claim superiority while sporting that look, I'll never know. Here's the thing, though. Rockwell was extraordinarily good at getting attention, but terrible at building actual power. The American Nazi Party never had more than a few hundred members at most. They had no political influence whatsoever. Despite all the headlines, all the outrage, all the swastikas and uniforms and inflammatory rhetoric, Rockwell's following was essentially insignificant. But Rockwell understood publicity. He would show up at civil rights rallies with signs reading, "Race mixing is Jewish communism." He'd get himself arrested on purpose. He would say the most shocking things possible to reporters, knowing that they would print it, and they did. The media couldn't resist him. He was too outrageous, too photogenic in his Nazi regalia, too quotable in his hatred. By the mid-1960s, though, even Rockwell started to realize that he'd hit a wall. Shock value only gets you so far. A political movement devoted entirely to provocation doesn't actually go anywhere. So he started thinking about how to expand his appeal, how to get his message more palatable to regular Americans. The solution? White unity. Instead of limiting his ideology to Nordic or Germanic purity, the traditional Nazi obsession, Rockwell broadened it. Southern Europeans, Eastern Europeans, even Greeks, they could all be part of the master race now. It was racism with a bigger tent. On January 1st, 1967, Rockwell made it official. The American Nazi Party was renamed the National Socialist White People's Party, the NSWPP. The iconography shifted to be more American, less explicitly German. In a June meeting, Rockwell pushed for moving even further away from the German National Socialist model, though the details of that meeting were later hotly contested. Not everyone was happy about this. Matt Cole, Rockwell's second-in-command, absolutely hated these changes. Cole was a true believer, a Hitler cultist, as some called him. He wanted to maintain ideological purity. So did William Luther Pierce, another high-ranking member. But Rockwell prevailed. He was still in charge. There was even talk that Rockwell might replace Cole as his successor with Carl Allen, an estranged former member who would be more open to this new direction. Reconciliation meetings were held, but they never concluded. Now, on a personal front, the week before his death, Rockwell's infant daughter, born to his mistress, Barbara Van Getz, died of a congenital illness. He was devastated. Friends said he seemed inconsolable in those final days. So that's who George Lincoln Rockwell was in August of 1967, a notorious extremist trying to rebrand, a man who had generated enormous controversy but zero actual power, a leader whose second-in-command resented his new direction, and a father grieving a lost child. Enter here a Nazi named John Padler. Crimes of the Centuries is sponsored by Rula. I was talking with a friend this week who's going through a separation, and she said her weekly therapy sessions have been the one thing keeping her grounded.
That's awesome she found a good therapist. That can be tough.
Exactly. That's why I love what Rula's doing. They make high-quality mental health care easy and affordable for everyone. You can get matched with a licensed therapist who takes your insurance, and the average copay is only $15 a session.
And it's all online, right? So you can skip the waiting room small talk and just focus on getting the help you need.
Yep. Rula matches you with in-network providers based on your goals, preferences, and background, and you can often schedule an appointment as soon as the next day. It's real therapy from real licensed professionals, and they stick with you throughout your care to make sure you're making progress.
Thousands have already trusted Rula to support them on their journey towards better mental health and overall well-being. Head over to rula.com/COTC to get started today.
After you sign up, they'll ask where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. Go to rula.com/COTC and take the first step toward better mental health today. You deserve quality care from someone who cares. John Padler was ethnically Greek, which in the world of American Nazis was a problem. His real surname was Patselos. Patler had had a violent childhood. His father reportedly killed his mother when he was only 5 years old. He was convicted of several crimes in his youth and treated for mental health issues. By his late teens, he was already expressing anti-Semitic attitudes and had joined the American Nazi Party by 1960. He changed it to Patler to make it sound more like Hitler. That's the kind of person we're dealing with. Patler had been a cartoonist whose work was featured in the propaganda magazine The Stormtrooper, and he absolutely worshipped George Lincoln Rockwell. But other members of the party, particularly Matt Cole and William Luther Pierce, despised him. They taunted him about his Greek heritage. To them, he wasn't Aryan enough. He wasn't pure. Rockwell, though, defended Patler. This was exactly the kind of situation where Rockwell's new white unity ideology came into play. Greeks were white, Rockwell argued. They belonged in the movement. Patler was proof that the master race didn't have to be limited to Germanic bloodlines. In fact, it was Patler himself who had helped instigate these changes. He was pushing Rockwell toward this broader pan-European white supremacy. To Cole and the old guard, this was heresy. To Patler, it was survival. But Patler was also profoundly unstable. Go figure, instability in the Nazi movement, right? He had some Marxist sympathies, which is bizarre for a Nazi. He had left the party in 1961 with another member to form a splinter group, only to come crawling back. Between 1966 and 1967, he drifted in and out of the organization repeatedly. Patler saw Rockwell as a father figure. But he also blamed Rockwell for everything wrong in his life. I mean, it was a toxic, dependent relationship. And then there was the affair. Rockwell slept with Patler's wife. Afterward, Patler sent Rockwell a letter saying he was fine with it. Whether he actually was or not, who can say? By this point, Patler had 2 children with his wife. The kids seemed to give him more confidence, made him question his place in the movement, made him hate being separated from his family for Rockwell's cause. In March 1967, Patler was stationed at a post in Spotsylvania, about an hour away from Arlington. He hated it. He abandoned his post and returned to Arlington to be with his family. Rockwell's response was swift and brutal. He had the locks on Patler's door cut off, and his possessions moved. Then Rockwell wrote a discharge letter. The charges: abandoning his post, gross insubordination, insulting conduct to superiors, neglect of duties, promoting dissension, promoting distrust by non-Nordic members, and usurping authority. Patler was expelled immediately, permanently. But Rockwell didn't even deliver the news himself. He delegated it to Cole. The man Patler saw as a father wouldn't even look him in the eye while casting him out. Patler spent the rest of the spring enraged. He wrote letters disavowing Rockwell and the party. Then he would turn around and write other letters begging for forgiveness. His final letter to Rockwell is heartbreaking in its desperation. Quote, "I don't think there are 2 people on earth who think and feel the same as we do. You are a very important part of my life. I need you as much as you need me. Without you, there is no future." End quote. Then came June 28, 1967. Rockwell returned to the party's headquarters and found the driveway blocked by a fallen tree and branches. When he got out to clear it, someone fired at him. The shot barely missed his head. Rockwell chased after the shooter but couldn't catch him. He claimed there were 2 men. His bodyguard later said Rockwell told him, quote, "I suspect treachery from someone very close to me," end quote. But Rockwell wouldn't say who. He said if he was wrong, it would destroy the party. John Hancock, the laundromat manager, apparently witnessed it. He nearly ran over a man fleeing through the bushes along Wilson Boulevard. Rockwell increased his security after that. He applied for a handgun carry permit. 2 months later, while that application was still pending, Rockwell was killed. Let's walk through August 25th, 1967 with a bit more precision. Rockwell woke up at 6:30 that morning. He had breakfast with other NSWPP members. The plan for the afternoon was to drive into Washington, D.C. and distribute the premiere issue of their new newspaper, White Power. That morning, Rockwell worked on his book, also called White Power, which eventually would be published after his death. At 11:30 a.m., Rockwell told the group he would be back shortly. He was going to do laundry. The Speedy Laundromat was close, just across Wilson Boulevard. He could practically see the headquarters from there. He parked his Chevrolet in front of the laundromat, walked inside. The attendant was a woman named Ruby Pierce.
He put his clothes in each tub, those 2 tubs. And then he put his detergent in and he started the machine. And he said, "Oh, I forgot something." I don't know whether he said detergent or what. He said, "I forgot something." And he went out.
That's when Rockwell walked back out to his car. He started the engine, backed out of the parking space, put it in drive. The shooter was on the roof of the laundromat. It was flat, easy to stand on. He was using a long-barreled Mauser pistol, the kind with a wooden holster that doubles as a shoulder stock. A broomstick Mauser, they call it. 2 shots through the driver's side windshield. The first shot tore through Rockwell's shirt. Now, that second shot hit him directly in the chest and, as I said, ruptured his aorta, the main artery carrying blood from the heart. The impact slammed him back against the seat, and his corncob pipe went flying. Looking back on his injury, it's really a miracle that he was able to get on his feet, but that was only brief. His knees quickly buckled. He hit the ground at 12:02 p.m., hemorrhaging massively from the damaged blood vessels. It took about a minute for him to die.
George Lincoln Rockwell, leader of the American Nazi Party, meets a violent end. Murdered by a sniper's bullet in a Virginia shopping center not far from his headquarters. Suburban Arlington is the scene of the shooting, and the sniper's perch was the roof of a coin-operated laundry. He was a former Navy pilot and founded the Nazi group in 1959.
People from the nearby shops rushed to the scene. This is audio from interviews with witnesses.
Now, you were in the laundromat at the time of the shooting. Did you hear the shots?
Yes, sir, I heard the shots and footsteps when he ran back across the building.
Oh, you heard the man walking across the roof?
You can hear him when they run across the roof. Anybody going across the roof, you can hear
Now,
him.
tell us, what did you do?
Well, immediately looked up and saw Mr. Rockwell fall out of his car on the passenger side of the street.
Yeah.
And he had 2 shots been fired through the windshield, and we went out almost immediately, and he was dead almost immediately.
Did you see Rockwell when he got here today?
Yes, I did.
Fair. You came up and parked in front of the place?
Parked almost in front of all the shots. And
Did you hear the shots?
yes,
Did you see?
saw him slump over,
Yeah.
fall down from the steering wheel.
But you didn't go up to the body.
No, we were out trying to see who'd fired the shots mainly.
And then you saw this fellow? Or
We didn't see him. No, we figured the only way he could get off the building would be from the back.
Mhm.
And we ran around behind the stores hoping we could look at him then.
And then started chasing.
And we started running off in the direction that we surmised he would have gone.
2 barbers from Tom's Barber Shop, Tom Blackney and Jim Cummings, ran back out and saw a man running away near the side of the building. They chased him. The man vaulted over a wall and disappeared in a nearby neighborhood. Cummings gave police a description: dark pants, dark trench coat, maybe a yellow shirt. 45 minutes later, Arlington Police Inspector Raymond Cole spotted John Patler about a half a mile away. He was soaked in sweat, wearing a yellow shirt. Cole recognized him as a member of the NSWPP and called for backup. When more police arrived, they converged on Patler. He ran again into another neighborhood. They cornered him at a bus stop and arrested him. Then they started searching for the weapon along his escape route. They found it on Bon Air Park, wedged under a rock in a stream underwater. It belonged to Robert Allison Lloyd, another member of the American Nazi Party. Padler was charged with first-degree murder.
Rockwell's accused killer is a former member of his extremist group.
His bond was set at $50,000, or nearly $500,000 in today's money. But here's what makes this complicated. Padler denied he did it, and the evidence was largely circumstantial. The trial that would soon come would raise more questions than it answered. But before we get there, we need to talk about the funeral, because what happened there was absolute chaos. Crimes of the Centuries is sponsored by Cornbread. You know what we've both been reaching for lately? Cornbread hemp.
Yeah, those CBD gummies are kind of our go-to when life feels a little too lifey.
Exactly. We've tried just about everything they make, and I even stocked up on their THC seltzers recently because honestly, they're the perfect way to unwind without the hangover.
Same goes for the gummies. Cornbread hemp only uses the best part of the hemp plant, the flower, for the purest, most potent CBD. No fillers, no junk, just full spectrum goodness.
And they're USDA organic and third-party lab tested, so you know exactly what you're getting. It's clean, simple, and it works.
Right now, Crimes of the Centuries listeners can save 30% on their first order. Just head to cornbreadhemp.com/COTC and use code COTC at checkout.
That's cornbreadhemp.com/COTC and use code COTC to get 30% off your first order. The assassination of George Lincoln Rockwell made international headlines. But what happened next? Well, that's when things got truly bizarre. First, there was a fight over the body itself. Rockwell's family wanted a private burial in Southport Island, Maine. Just family, quiet, dignified. Matt Cole had other plans. He wanted an elaborate Nazi funeral, full regalia, maximum publicity, a propaganda spectacle. Cole initially requested that Rockwell be buried at Arlington National Cemetery in full Nazi uniform. Rockwell's brother Bobby was furious. He called it a disgusting exhibition orchestrated by nitwits. He took legal action to claim the body. But Cole had Rockwell's will on his side, which specified that Cole would handle his remains. And then Cole made a threat. He would surround Rockwell's mother's house with uniformed Nazis to, quote-unquote, mourn. She lived in a Jewish neighborhood. The family gave up their claim by August 27th. Bobby told the press it was unlikely any family member would attend the services. Federal officials approved a military burial at Culpeper National Cemetery. Rockwell was an honorably discharged Navy veteran, after all. But they set conditions. No Nazi insignias on the mourners. No all-Caucasian honor guard, which the party had actually requested. But they did allow Rockwell to be buried in his Nazi uniform. The funeral was scheduled for August 29th. A uniformed Nazi procession arrived at Culpeper National Cemetery that morning. Swastikas, brown shirts, the whole 9 yards. When they got there, the entrance was blocked. Local police, state police, and military police, flown in by helicopter, formed a wall. The cemetery superintendent came out and explained the ruling to Cole. Your men need to take off their swastikas if they want to enter. The Nazis refused. Both sides waited. Hours passed. It became a standoff. At one point during this absurd waiting game, a car in the funeral procession was nearly hit by a freight train. Then things escalated. A member of the army who had been on standby broke ranks and defected to the Nazi side. He was immediately arrested. In response, a member of the NSWPP jumped onto the hearse. Then he lunged at the military police. He was arrested. More neo-Nazis jumped at the police. More arrests. The military withdrew their approval for the burial entirely. The Nazis booed. Cole ordered everyone back to Arlington with a hearse and Rockwell's body still inside. The next day, Cole had Rockwell's body smuggled out of the funeral home. It was secretly cremated. In February 1968, 5 months later, Cole tried again. He applied to have Rockwell's remains properly interred in a national cemetery. This time, the request was flatly refused. The back and forth continued. Here's a Nazi talking about how Rockwell was being denied basic human decency. Oh, the irony.
I have a news release. In spite of all obstruction by military and civilian authorities, we are continuing our efforts to inter Commander Rockwell's mortal remains in accordance with his express wishes. Arrangements have been made with a Fredericksburg funeral director for burial on the party's property in Spotsylvania, but it was learned that injunctions would be filed contesting this right, further delaying decent interment. We are appalled by the lack of normal human decency shown by these officials in obstructing interment with petty technicalities. We shall continue to honor Commander Rockwell's wishes to the best of our ability. End of release. I can only answer a few questions, gentlemen.
What are his wishes?
His wishes are to be buried with full Nazi honor.
Here's where it gets even stranger. In 2017, 50 years after the assassination, Martin Kerr, the leader of what's now called the New Order, which is what the NSWPP eventually became, said they still had Rockwell's ashes in an urn, but he refused to say where it was located. So George Lincoln Rockwell, the founder of the American Nazi Party, one of the most hated men in 1960s America, is still out there somewhere, in an urn, location unknown. The drama surrounding the funeral was front-page news for over a week. The standoff, the arrest, the train, the smuggling, it dominated the news cycle even more than the assassination itself. This wasn't some fringe event that only a few people paid attention to. A 2000 study looked at public perception of various high-profile assassinations. 49% of Americans said they were not surprised by Rockwell's murder.
Rockwell's own father said he just knew that this was going to happen to his son one day.
For comparison, only 31% said that about Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination. Only 3% for JFK. Speaking of JFK, here's Rockwell's thoughts on the man.
Well, I don't think that 2 bullets can make a saint out of a man who was a bad man before. I despise the Southern hypocrites who are now all lugubriously groaning and moaning what a great man he was. I think Kennedy was a terrible president. However, I'm disgraced to think that the man could be shot in our country any more than I would care to be shot here.
After Rockwell's death, the Jewish community had mixed reactions. Many condemned the violence, while also making it clear they weren't mourning a Holocaust denier who had called for their murder. Benjamin Epstein of the Anti-Defamation League noted the irony, quote, "A man who for so long advocated and incited violence and trained his followers in the use of firearms should himself reach a violent end," end quote. But among neo-Nazis, shock, disbelief, and, almost immediately, conspiracy theories. John Padler's trial began in Virginia Commonwealth Court. He was represented by Helen Lane, a former county school board member, along with attorneys Thomas Harrigan and Thomas Morris. On August 30th, 1967, just 5 days after the murder, John Padler had his first court appearance under heavy guard. That same day, an Australian Rockwell sympathizer jumped at Padler in the courtroom. He was found guilty of contempt of court immediately and deported the following month. The trial against Padler involved 91 witnesses, and the central question everyone wanted answered was, why? Why did Padler kill Rockwell? The prosecution had a straightforward motive: revenge. Patler had been expelled from the party, humiliated, cast out by the man he saw as a father figure. He wanted payback, they said. But Patler's defense team said he didn't do it. They pointed to the ideological dispute within the party. Maybe the killer was a Nazi, angry about Rockwell's pan-white direction, someone who hated that Greeks and other non-Germanic Europeans were being welcomed in, someone who wanted to preserve ideological purity. They pointed specifically at Matt Cole. Think about it, the defense argued. Cole had the most to gain from Rockwell's death. He became the leader. He hated the new direction. And here's the key detail. Cole was the only person who knew in advance that Rockwell was going to the laundromat that day. The prosecution countered that it could have been a habit. Patler had lived with Rockwell for a few years. He could have known Rockwell's routines, could have predicted he would go there. The defense also suggested that Robert Allison Lloyd, whose gun was used in the killing, might have been the actual shooter. Lloyd claimed he had loaned the gun to Patler back in 1964, and when he asked for it back, Patler said someone had stolen it. But Rockwell's bodyguard testified that he had seen Lloyd with the gun after that date. So, who was lying? Then there was the physical evidence, or lack thereof. Shoe prints were found on the laundromat roof. They were much larger than Patler's feet. When police examined Patler's shoes, they found no roofing, gravel, or tar, the kind that would have been on the roof. But here's what they did find. Gun casings on the property of Patler's father-in-law, the kind of casings you'd get from target practice. They were fired from Lloyd's gun, the murder weapon. The prosecution also argued that Patler had been the one who had tried to kill Rockwell back in June. Remember that assassination attempt? The fallen tree, the shot that barely missed Rockwell's head? That was Patler, they said. John Hancock, the laundromat manager who had witnessed the June incident, said he saw Rockwell chasing someone that day. Later, when he saw Patler's picture on TV after the arrest, he said, "I'm sure he's the one." But Patler had an alibi. He claimed he had left his home after a family dispute and was waiting at the bus stop to go back when police arrested him. It was just bad timing. Wrong place, wrong time, he said. The jury didn't buy it. After 30 hours of deliberation, they found John Patler guilty of first-degree murder in December 1967. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison, the minimum sentence for the crime. Patler appealed. He was released on $40,000 bond while the appeal worked its way through the system. In 1970, the Virginia Supreme Court upheld his conviction. The bond was revoked. He was ordered back to prison. He appealed again, this time to the U.S. Supreme Court. In May 1972, they unanimously rejected his appeal. Patler was paroled in August 1975 after serving just 8 years. A year later, he violated his parole terms and spent another 6 years in prison. He was released when his sentence was completed. Rockwell's biographer, Frederick Simonelli, called the evidence against Patler, quote, less than compelling, end quote. Meanwhile, another writer called it damning. The truth is probably somewhere in between. Circumstantial, but substantial. And in the meantime, Patler has never admitted his guilt. Even after he was released, after he denounced neo-Nazism, after he changed his last name back to Patsalos, he's never said he did it, which is why, among Rockwell's followers, the conspiracy theories never stopped. Crimes of the Centuries is sponsored by Hiya Health. So H has declared war on all things green. Broccoli, spinach, even lettuce. I mean, really, if it even looks like a vegetable, it's not happening.
Yeah, I watched him side-eye a green bean last week like it personally betrayed him.
Exactly, which is why I'm so glad for Haya. Their kids' vitamins fill in those nutrition gaps without the sugar or junk that's in most kids' vitamins.
And somehow H loves them, probably because they taste great.
Oh, and Haya just launched their new Kids Daily Greens Plus Superfoods, chocolate flavored, which means kids will actually drink it. It's packed with over 55 whole food ingredients to support brain power development and digestion. You just scoop, shake, and sip with milk or a non-dairy option, and you're done.
It's like stealth health for picky eaters.
We've worked out a special deal with Haya for their best-selling children's vitamin. Receive 50% off your first order. To claim this deal, you must go to hayahealth.com/COTC.
This deal isn't available on their regular site. Go to HIYAHEALTH.com/COTC and get your kids the full body nourishment they need to grow into healthy adults.
Most members of the NSWPP accepted that Patler killed Rockwell, but they couldn't all agree on whether he acted alone or if he had even pulled the trigger himself. The wildest theory came from Carl Allen, a former high-ranking American Nazi Party member who had left to form his own neo-Nazi group. Allen organized something called the John Patler Defense Fund and promoted the idea that either the killing itself, or at least the blame placed on Patler, was the result of a Jewish conspiracy. Because, of course, he did. Specifically, he pointed to the Anti-Defamation League. Allen initially agreed that Patler was the killer, but then he changed his mind. He came to believe that Jews had orchestrated the assassination to eliminate Rockwell, then framed one of his own followers to discredit the entire movement. There is no evidence of any of this. By 1967, Rockwell wasn't actually a threat to anyone. His party was tiny. In fact, Rockwell's biographer, Frederick Simonelli, argued that Rockwell actually helped the Jewish community in a perverse way. Quote, as a visible and vocal symbol of anti-Semitic extremism, Rockwell had value as a beacon around which the Jewish community could be mobilized, end quote. He increased engagement in ADL activities by being such an obvious villain. Here's where it gets interesting. There's evidence that Allen and others didn't even believe their own conspiracy theory. At a meeting the day of the assassination, a former Nazi Party member named Seth Ryan, who hated Patler, may have suggested this deflection campaign. Ryan had watched what happened when Malcolm X was killed by one of his own. The Black Muslim movement was deeply embarrassed. The neo-Nazis, Ryan suggested, should avoid the same humiliation. Blame it on the Jews. Blame it on their enemies. Whether Patler did it or not, create a narrative that protects the movement. Very few of Rockwell's followers actually believed the Jewish conspiracy, but it had some appeal. Now, the conspiracy theory that had more traction, especially among those close to Rockwell, was that the murder was orchestrated by other members of the NSWPP as a coup. That theory went that Matt Cole, William Luther Pierce, and Robert Allison Lloyd worked together. The day before the murder, Rockwell got into an argument with these three men. One eyewitness claimed Rockwell locked them out of their offices and said he would expel them. According to this theory, Cole orchestrated the killing. Lloyd assisted as a weapons expert. It was his gun, after all. And Pierce was involved somehow. Then they framed Patler, who all three men despised. After Rockwell's death, these three men functioned as leaders of the NSWPP together, at least for a time. And Lloyd, who had been dismissed from his position in 1966, was suddenly reinstated as deputy after Rockwell died. Barbara Van Getz, Rockwell's secretary and mistress, the woman whose infant daughter had died just a week before his assassination, initially believed Patler was guilty. But by early 1968, after Cole started pushing her out of the group, she became convinced that Cole, Pierce, and Lloyd had ordered the murder or done it themselves. She told Rockwell's mother. She claimed other high-ranking members agreed with her. She left the party later that year. Francis Joseph Smith went even further. Smith was Rockwell's personal bodyguard, and he had apparently promised Rockwell that if he was ever assassinated, Smith would investigate. So he did. Smith concluded that Cole, Pierce, and Lloyd had orchestrated the murder, but he claimed the actual shooter was a different man, Christopher Vidnovich, an American Nazi Party member who was known to be extremely violent and who also hated Rockwell's ideological changes. As a result of Smith making this accusation public, Smith and Vidnovich later had a shootout with each other in rural Maine. Both survived. After that, Smith stopped investigating. In 1968, a pseudonymous neo-Nazi wrote a letter strongly insinuating that Cole was responsible for the murder. Harold Covington, another Nazi who despised Cole, distributed this letter for decades afterward. Some even spread posters that said Cole was wanted for murder. None of these allegations have ever been proven. John Padler was convicted. The jury decided the evidence pointed to him. But he's never admitted guilt, and the conspiracy theories never completely died. What did die was Rockwell's party, and with it, the brief moment when American neo-Nazism had a single, visible leader. Crimes of the Centuries is happy to recommend Monsters Among Us. Here's a fun fact about Scott you all probably don't know. He has, let's just say, an enthusiasm for ghost stories.
That is a fun fact. What can I say? I appreciate a well-constructed haunting. Bonus points if there's a creaky staircase involved.
Then you're gonna love this. Have you ever heard a true paranormal story that terrified you so much it stuck with you for years? Well, Monsters Among Us has thousands.
Ooh, this is a podcast?
Yep, and each week, Monsters Among Us brings you chilling, true stories from real people sharing their eerie experiences with the paranormal.
So these are actual witnesses?
Exactly. The tales are told in the witnesses' own voices from callers all around the world. You'll hear about people who've seen spirits on deserted roads, mysterious lights in the sky, even a guy who says the Sasquatch helped nurse him back to health.
That's fantastic. I'm totally listening to this.
Host Derek Hayes curates the stories and gives the show that perfect spooky meets nostalgic vibe. Whether you're a skeptic or a true believer, Monsters Among Us is the perfect podcast to fuel your fascination with the paranormal and send shivers down your spine. Listen to Monsters Among Us podcast now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. So you might be wondering what happened to John Padler. In a 1970 interview, while still maintaining his innocence, Padler said something chilling. He said he thought that the members of the National Socialist White People's Party were still watching him. Quote, "So I never go any place without looking behind me. I think one of them may be the guy who really killed Rockwell," end quote. In a Washington Post story headlined "Ex-Nazi Takes a Different Role," it was reported that Padler had founded a newspaper to serve the Washington area's growing Spanish-speaking minority. At 32 years old, Patsalos said, quote, "It's the first constructive thing I've done. I grew up fighting, hating people. Even in the Marine Corps, guys would call me a greasy Greek. I thought they were right, that I was inferior. I thought I was dark and ugly, and I felt bad because I didn't have blue eyes. The one I really hated was myself. I don't know why I joined the Nazis. I think it was a kind of attempted suicide. Man, the stuff we did. I could have been killed," end quote. He went on to say that the hate he felt was like a virus. It's a disease, only it eats up your spirit instead of your body. I couldn't find much record after that of what happened to the man. His latter years remain obscure, which is probably what he wanted. He faded into anonymity, a footnote to a story most Americans have forgotten. But Rockwell's death, well, that had consequences that rippled for decades. After Rockwell's death, a contingent of the neo-Nazi movement began advocating for what they called leaderless resistance, decentralized cells, lone wolves, guerrilla warfare, and targeted violence instead of trying to build a mass political party. These ideas existed before Rockwell died, but the vacuum his death created gave them prominence. Scholar Spencer Sunshine put it this way, quote, "The post-Rockwell period of U.S. neo-Nazism is when it developed the basic form it would look like far into the future. The decentralization of neo-Nazism helped lay the groundwork for how the movement's structure unfolded. If Rockwell had lived or been succeeded by a popular leader, a single major neo-Nazi party may have existed for much longer." End quote. Neo-Nazi James Mason wrote later that the movement was, quote, "lost when we lost him. We carried on in his absence as though we expected his eventual return. As it turned out, no one had the vaguest idea of what to do or how to do it." End quote. Matt Cole took over as leader of the NSWPP, and he was, by virtually all accounts, terrible at it. He was rigid, dogmatic, refused to adapt. Less than 6 months after Rockwell's death, Carl Allen, remember him from the conspiracy theories, called Cole a robot and said, quote, "The only reason he leads the party now is because everyone else left is even dumber than him," end quote. Academic Jeffrey Kaplan wrote that Cole seemed to work on, quote, "two concurrent tracks, a highly successful effort to anger and alienate the old guard, while simultaneously leaving the new recruits with such a bad taste in their mouths that many left the movement, and others became lifelong enemies," end quote. The result? The NSWPP underwent numerous schisms. William Luther Pierce left and founded the National Alliance, which by the 1990s became the largest neo-Nazi organization in the United States. Pierce also wrote The Turner Diaries, the racist novel that inspired Oklahoma City bomber Timothy McVeigh. Another guy named Frank Collin formed his own group, the National Socialist Party of America. Joseph Tomasi founded the National Socialist Liberation Front. Harold Covington started yet another splinter group. In the 1980s, Cole himself changed the party's name to the New Order and turned it into an esoteric religious neo-Nazi organization. The movement decentralized. Instead of one visible leader and one main party, there were dozens of smaller groups, all competing, all with slightly different hateful ideologies and tactics. After Rockwell's death, a contingent of the neo-Nazi movement began advocating for what they called leaderless resistance, decentralized cells, lone wolves, guerrilla warfare, and targeted violence instead of trying to build a mass political party. These ideas existed before Rockwell died, but the vacuum his death created gave them prominence. Scholar Spencer Sunshine put it this way, quote, "The post-Rockwell period of U.S. neo-Nazism is when it developed the basic form it would look like far into the future. The decentralization of neo-Nazism helped lay the groundwork for how the movement's structure unfolded. If Rockwell had lived or been succeeded by a popular leader, a single major neo-Nazi party may have existed for much longer," end quote. You might be wondering why the shift to decentralized groups and lone wolves? Partly because Rockwell's centralized approach had demonstrably failed. Despite all the attention, the American Nazi Party never achieved real political power. But his assassination also proved how vulnerable high-profile leaders were. A single visible party with a charismatic figurehead could be easily monitored, infiltrated, and disrupted by law enforcement. The leader could be arrested, discredited, or killed, but a diffuse network of small cells and radicalized individuals operating independently, that's much harder to track and much harder to stop. No single arrest or assassination can decapitate a movement that has no head. It's a darker, more insidious strategy, and one that's proven disturbingly effective in the decades since. And here's where this story from 1967 connects directly to 2025. On September 10th, Charlie Kirk was assassinated while speaking at Utah Valley University in Orem, Utah. He was shot once in the neck by a sniper positioned on the roof of a campus building approximately 142 yards away. The parallels are unsettling. Both Rockwell and Kirk were shot by snipers firing from rooftops during public speaking events. Both were controversial right-wing figures who made a point to speak at college campuses because it generated headlines and had the potential to draw young people into the movement. Both were killed in what authorities called targeted, politically motivated assassinations, and both became instant martyrs. Kirk wasn't a neo-Nazi. He was a mainstream conservative activist, co-founder of Turning Point USA. But his death has already sparked the same kinds of questions about political violence, rhetoric, and martyrdom that followed Rockwell's assassination nearly 60 years earlier. Rockwell continues to be enormously influential among modern white supremacists. His writings are still circulated. His tactics, provocation, media manipulation, using shock value for attention, have been copied by countless extremists since. The man who died in a laundromat parking lot in 1967 didn't achieve anything close to political power, but the movement he started and the fragmentation his death caused created a blueprint that's still being followed today. George Lincoln Rockwell is largely forgotten by the American public, but among those who share his hateful ideology, he's a martyr, and his death might have done more for the neo-Nazi movement than his life ever could have. To research this case, I read contemporary news articles and supplemented it with Encyclopedia.com's entry on Rockwell and Arlington Historical's excellent local history piece, The Assassination of an Arlington Nazi. Additional biographical details came from genealogical resources. I also watched Rockwell a bit on YouTube, the commenters on which were depressing. Crimes of the Centuries is available early and ad-free through Grab Bag Collab. Join us at patreon.com/GrabBagCollab to hear not just exclusive content related to this show, but to also get access to several other shows on our profit-sharing network. Unless noted in the citations, this show was researched and written by me, Amber Hunt, and produced by Amanda Rossman and Henry Lavoie. Original music is by Bruce Hunt, Andrew Higley, and occasionally by my son, Hunt Van Ben Scoten. Other music comes from Soundstripe and Epidemic Sound. If you like the show, help us out by rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts. For more information or to recommend a case, go to centuriespod.com.